Assalamu alaikum dear students. Today we'll discuss about how to study English literature. In today's lecture we'll discuss some methods of studying literature. Dear students, English literature is a complex subject and many students end up having to study it at some point. With so many things to keep track of, it can feel to even decide where to start. Whether you are studying for a test, an AP exam, or a college course, you can take some steps to help you achieve your goals. Today we'll discuss some methods. Method number one is laying the groundwork. In this method, there are some further points too we'll discuss. The first point is start early. Do not wait to study until the night before exam, particularly with a subject such as English literature, where you will probably be asked analytical questions as well as content questions. You must have time to familiarize yourself with some of complexities of your material. Being able to summarize the plot or name some character is unlikely to be all you need to do. Basically, while you have to start for your as you can mid exam, final exam, you should start early. Some students wait that there is a time, but you should start. As being the student of English literature, you should start earlier for your preparation. Examine what you already know. Before starting your preparation, you should know that what you know already. Now, write out all the details you can remember from your first reading of the text, as well as anything you remember from your course lectures. Don't cheat by looking at your notes or your text. Just write down what you are confident what you remember. This will help your starting base and will reveal any gaps in your knowledge. This is the thing, you should examine yourself that what you know about your coursework already know. Now, consider whether there are literary terms you are unfamiliar with. This is very important, the thing which you have to deal with the literature. Many tests and exams in English literature want you to be familiar with some key terms such as stanza, irony, alliteration, speaker, and figurative language. While you are not likely to be expected to have comprehensive knowledge of literary terminology, understanding some of these key concepts will be important to your success. There are many guides available that can help you find definitions for important literary concepts, but there are a few crucial terms. A stanza is a poetic division of lines and is equivalent to the paragraph in prose writing. Usually stanzas are at least 3 lines long. Group of 2 lines are usually called couplets. Irony is its basic level, says one thing but means another, which is almost always the opposite of what is actually said. For example, a character who meets someone in a raging blizzard might say, "Lovely weather we are having, isn't it?" This is ironic because the reader can see that it is clearly not lovely weather. William Shakespeare, Jane Austen, and Charles Dickens are famous for their use of irony. Ironical statements are very tricky. You should focus on these. Don't confuse irony with misfortune, which Alanis Morissette's songs ironic is culpable of a black fly in your chardonnay is definitely unfortunate, but it's not ironic. A speaker usually refers to the person from whose point of view a poem is given, although it may also be used to refer to a novel's narrator. Keeping the speaker separate from the author is important, especially in poetic drama monologues such as Robert Browning My Last Duchess, in which you can say Manical Dick admits to having murdered his wife. Obviously, it is the speaker, not Browning, who is saying in these things. Figurative language is discussed in more length in part 2 of this article, but it is the opposite of literal. You can say literal language. Figurative language uses techniques such as metaphor, similes, personification, and hyperbole to make a point more vividly. For example, in Shakespeare's play Antony and Cleopatra describes Mark Antony his this way: his legs bestride the ocean, his reared arm crested the world. This is hyperbolic language. Obviously, Antony's legs did not literally straddle the ocean, but it powerfully conveys Cleopatra's high opinion of him and his power. Basically, these are the terms, literary terms. Every term is different from one another. Dramatic irony occurs when the readers or audience knows important information that a character does not, such as the fact that Oedipus killed his father and will marry his mother. So this is also an important aspect, dramatic irony. Alliteration is a technique used most often in poetry and plays. It is the repetition of the same initial consonants in multiple words within a short space. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers is an example of alliteration. Basically, this is the repetition of words. Look at sample questions if you care. Before you are going for your preparation of exam, you should know that which sort of question can be asked. If you were given a study guide or sample question, see how much of this material you are already familiar with. This will help you zone in on what needs more work and make a study plan. Now we are going to discuss method number 2. You should start with the rereading your text. Rereading of text, you should have already read the text for class, but if you are studying for an exam, make sure you go back and reread it to catch things you missed out on the first time. Basically, this is very important aspect for the preparation of your exam. Rereading the text. Basically, when you used to reread the text, you cover all the things which you have missed. Look for figurative language. Many authors use techniques such as metaphor, similes, and personification to emphasize their points. These may be crucial to understanding the literary works you are reading. For example, knowing that white whale in Moby Dick represent, among other things, Captain Ahab's hubris is essential to being able to understand Melville's novel. Metaphor make direct comparisons between two seemingly dissimilar things. They are stronger than similes. For example, the last line of F. Scott novels The Great Gatsby is a famous metaphor comparing human lives to boats trying to make progress against a strong current. So we beat on boats. Again, the current borne back easily into the past. Similes also make comparison, but they don't directly state that X is Y. For example, Margaret Mitchell uses a simile to describe Scarlett O'Hara interest in Ashley Wilkes with a simile in her novel Gone with the Wind. The very mystery of him excited her curiosity like a door that had neither lock nor key. Personification occurs when a non-human animal or object is given human characteristic in order to express an idea more powerfully. For example, Emily Dickinson frequently uses personification in her poems, as in this poem about a snake. A narrow fellow in the grass occasionally rides. You may have met him, did you not? His notice sudden is. So here the snake is a a narrow fellow who rides in the grass, which makes it seem almost like a dashing Victorian gentleman rather than a reptile. Consider the structure of your text. The way that another expresses her uh, or his ideas is often is as important as the ideas themselves. In many cases, the form and structure of the text will have some kind of influence on its subject matter. If you are reading fiction, think about the order in which the events are recounted, or there you can say flashbacks or places in the narrative that cycle back in time. So if you are reading the poetry, think about the form of the poetry, what type of poem it uh, is it something formally structured like a sonnet or sestina? Is it free verse which makes use elements such as you can say rhythm and alliteration but doesn't have a set rhyme scheme? The way the poem is written will often offer clues as to the mode the poet wanted to convey. So, when you are reading the poetry, you should be very careful about these things. Think about character. Uh, a character, although it also may be an action or situation that is believed to represent something universally recognized as part of human nature, the psychologist Carl Jung argued that collective unconscious of humanity, and thus we recognize experiences we have shared with others in archetypes. Several types of literature analysis have been influenced by Jung, so being familiar with some archetypes that may appear in your text will probably be useful. The hero is a character who embodies good and often fights against evil in a struggle to bring justice or restore order. Beowulf and Captain America are perfect example of the hero archetype. Basically, these all the terms of you can say literature which are very useful for any literary students. The innocent youth is a character who is usually inexperienced but whom others like because of the faith he or she has in the other people. For example, Pip in the Charles Dickens novel Great Expectation is an innocent youth, as is from Star Wars. Often these archetypes will experience some sort of coming of the age in later parts of the story. The mentor is tasked with caring for protecting the main character through wise advice and assistance. Uh, Gandalf in J.J.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Ring, the Hobbit is an excellent example of a mentor archetype, as is Obi-Wan Kenobi from the Star Wars movies. The doppelganger is a character who doubles for the main character in order to represent the dark side of the hero or heroine. Common example of the doppelgangers include Frankenstein and his creature in Mary Shelley's, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in the Robert Louis novel of the same name. The villain is a character with evil plans whom the hero must oppose. The villain will usually do anything to defeat the hero and is often though not always clever. Good example include Sher Khan from Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book, Smaug the dragon from the Hobbit, and the Joker from the Batman comics and film. Think about your situational archetypes. The other main type of archetypes you will probably encounter is situational, a very familiar and expected type of plot and progression. Some common situational archetypes includes the journey. This is an incredible common archetype and is referred in everything from stories of King Arthur to swift Gulliver's travel to. In this archetype, the main character undertakes a journey, physical or emotional, literal or figurative, to understand something about herself, himself, or the world around as her, him, or to achieve an important goal. Often the journey is very important to the plot, as with the fellowship of guests to destroy Sauron's one ring in the Lord of the Rings. The initiation, this archetype has similarities with the journey, but the focus is more on the hero heroines developing maturity through their experiences. This type of story may also be called a Bildungsroman. Henry Fielding's Tom Jones is an excellent example of this, as are the origin of most comic book heroes. For example, Peter Parker's lesson about how to handle great powers and great responsibility as he becomes Spider-Man. The fall. This is another very common archetype. In this archetype, the main character experiences a fall from grace as the consequences of his or her own action. Example of the archetype are all over classical literature, including King Lear from Shakespeare play, King Lear, Ahab from Melville's novel Moby Dick, and Saturn from John Milton's epic poem Paradise Lost. Consider how action develops from conflict. For many texts, particularly plays and fiction, there is an inciting incident that sets the main action of the story in motion. This movement disturbs the equilibrium of the situation, poses a problem, and sets off a series of events that will form the rest of the story. For example, in Shakespeare's Macbeth hears a prophecy from Troy of witches that says he will become king of Scotland. While he has never wanted to be king until this moment, the prophecy sets him on a path of ambition and murder that eventually leads in his downfall. As another example, in Arthur Miller's play, the Crucible, a group of young girls face a conflict. They have been caught doing naughty things in the woods and face punishment. To try to cover up their actions, they accuse their fellow villagers of witchcraft. This section incites the rest of the play story, which follows these accusations as they spin out of control. Now we'll discuss the method 3 is here, making useful notes for fiction and drama. Summarize each chapter or act in bullet points after you read through the text for the second time. This will make future review easier, as you will have a rough summary to work from. Do not get too bogged down in summary. You don't have to summarize every little things that happen in a chapter or act. Aim to note the main action of each one, as well as any important character of thematic moments. Make out character profiles for each main character. Obviously, main character is very important for anything, including anything important that the character says or does, along with links to other characters in the text. For plays, you may want to note the speeches that seem particularly important, such as Hamlet's to be or not to be speech, or the attention must be paid speech from Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman. Outline any problems the character face. Obviously, which sort of you can say difficulties or problems a character will face, you have to write down, or you have to note down. This can often be even more helpful than chapter summarize. What challenges and conflicts do the main character face? What are their goals? For example, Shakespeare's Hamlet has several problems he needs to solve. Is the ghost of his father urging him to seek revenge trustworthy? How can he take a revenge on his uncle in court full of people who are watching his every move? How can he overcome his natural tendency to overthink things, to work up the courage to take the revenge he wants. Basically, uh, every sort of problems which character face, that's the part of your exam. Determine whether these problems are solved. Sometimes problems are solved fairly neatly at the end of a story. The Death Star is destroyed in Star Wars. The One Ring is destroyed in Arrogant Resorted, and as king in Lord of the Rings. Sometimes problems are solved, but not in ideal ways. For example, Hamlet does achieve his revenge and fulfill the ghost request, but he also kills several innocent people along the way and ends up dead himself. Understanding whether characters achieved their goals or why they didn't will be useful in discussing the works in your exam. Remember some important statements made. While you don't necessarily need to memorize important statements or speeches, remembering what they are generally about can be very helpful when you go for make an argument about a text. For example, if you are studying Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, remembering that Mr. Darcy admits to meddling in Elizabeth's family affairs will be useful in explaining why they are so angry with each other early in the book. For example, he is too proud to admit that meddling really was wrong, and she is too prejudiced to admit he might have had motivations that made sense. Make more detailed notes including the main themes in the text and how each character is important in the text. Don't skimp on detail here. Nothing that the tone of Mary Shelley's is very sinister won't be much use in the exam if you don't have a way to describe what is making it feel sinister. Write down particularly vivid moments from the text. Not only can help you remember what happened in a chapter, they will give you evidence to use when you make claims about the text in your exam. Write down any symbol in the text and where they appear. Symbolism is a favorite tool of any author. If some elements such as color or specific item shows up more than once or twice, is likely to be a symbol that represents something important. For example, in Nathaniel Hawthorne's novel The Scarlet Letter, that Hester Prynne must wear in punishment of her adultery is an obvious, you can say, symbol, but her daughter Pearl also serves as a symbol. Like the Pearl is a reminder of her adultery, a token of her shame. Hester often dresses Pearl in beautiful gold and red dresses, physically linking her to the letter and the Hester's crime. Look up contemporary connections. It is often very helpful to be able to reference in your exam or essay some important cultural or social issues that were relevant at the time a text was first written. Use any course material you have, along with introductions to critical editions of the text and reliable resources such as those found through a library database to do a bit of research. Do not rely on websites such as Wikipedia or your own knowledge of a period, as both of these may be incomplete or inaccurate. Now we'll discuss the method number 4, making useful notes for poetry. Poetry is very important aspect in literature. So note what type of poem you are dealing with. So before dealing with any sort of poem, you should know that what type of poem that it is. Sometimes knowing the type of poem you are studying, such as whether it is a sonnet or sestina or haiku, can be very important to being able to discuss its meaning. You can often determine what type of poetry you are dealing with by examining the rhyme scheme, the pattern of the rhymes at the end of each line, and the meter, the number of poetic feet each line has. Many modern poets write in free verse, but this doesn't mean they are not also paying close attention to the form of their poetry. Look for the elements such as alliteration, assonance, repetition, the breaking of poetic lines, and the rhythm in the free verse poetry, just as you would in more formally structured poetry. Identify the speaker and the audience of the poem when possible. This is particularly important for poems such as dramatic monologues, and where the speaker is definitely not supposed to be the poet. Um, Anyhow, for example, Felicia Hemans, Robert Browning, and Alfred Lord Tennyson all wrote dramatic monologues from the points of view of characters very different than themselves. Identifying the speaker can trickier in lyric poetry, such as the type written by poets like Wordsworth or John Keats, because these poems are often written in first person, but don't make a clear distinction between the speaker and the poet. Nevertheless, even in poems that are writing using first person pronouns like I, always refer to the speaker as the speaker, not to the poet. Write down any symbols in the poem and where they appear. Just as with the prose writing, symbolism shows up all the time in poetry. Be on the lookout for the repeated elements, especially things like colors or natural imagery. For example, in William Wordsworth's poem Tintern Abbey, the eye is an important symbol that represents many things, including the poet's imagination. Wordsworth will often play on the similarity of sounds between I and I, further relating the two concepts. Remember that you don't have to memorize the poems you are studying. Just make sure you know the basics such as structure of the poem, themes, and overarching idea of a story. It can sometimes be helpful to memorize a key line or two from a poem so that you can use it as evidence. For example, if you are studying Walt Whitman Hughes' poem Leaves of Grass, you might want to memorize the short phrase, dismiss whatever insults your own soul, and your very flesh shall be a great poem. This short quotation encapsulates much of the meaning from the larger text, and being able to drop into an exam will help you support your claims. Now we'll discuss the last method of our today's lecture, handling difficult text. This is very important aspect. Reread passages you don't understand. This is a technique that how you can deal with the difficult text. Particularly in poetry, authors may use language unconventionally in order to make a more powerful impact on the reader. This can be confusing at first, but rereading the passage slowly and carefully will reward your attention. Avoid skimming material. This is very important aspect, especially if you are reading poetry or plays. Reading everything is very important. Skipping things such as stage direction in a Shakespeare play can mean you miss out on crucial information. Language in poems is precisely chosen and structured to have a particular effect. So missing even a word or two could damage your understanding of the whole text. This is very important. You should avoid. Read passages aloud. This technique works especially well with the poetry and plays, but it can also work for long, dense passages of prose in a novel, especially if it's something like a Charles Dickens novel where sentences can run to fulfill a paragraph. Reading the language aloud will help point out elements such as rhythm, alliteration, and repetition, which are all things that your exam may ask you to speak about. Make flashcards. If you are having trouble remembering things, make yourself some flashcards. Sometimes the transfer of material from one medium to another, from written notes to flashcards, will help you learn it more effectively. Flashcards are especially helpful for memorizing things such as literary terms and character names, they may be less helpful for remembering more complex information. This is very important for the student of literature. Making flashcard is very important aspect for the preparation of your exam. You can go through with this with very easier process. So that's all. Inshallah, see you in next lecture. Allah Hafiz.